You are about to unearth a story far older than the ink on any sacred scroll, a chilling narrative whispered through millennia, echoing from the very dawn of civilization. It is a tale you might recognize in fragmented dreams, a haunting echo of a pact with darkness, a terrible sacrifice, and a miraculous, agonizing transformation. This isn't just a fairy tale of cruelty and resilience. It is a forgotten relic, a symbolic blueprint woven into the fabric of human consciousness, older than most organized religions, yet still resonating with an unsettling power in your world today. The story centers on a girl, stripped of her agency, her very means of creation and connection, left without hands. Yet, this grotesque mutilation is merely the prelude to a deeper mystery. You will discover how this brutal narrative encodes secrets about fate, about the nature of innocence and corruption, about spiritual sleep and profound rebirth. Prepare to descend into the abyss of ancient pain and archetypal truth, for once you see the true face of this myth, you will realize that some stories never truly end. They simply transform, waiting for you to decipher their agonizing secrets. Let us return to the beginning, where her suffering was first carved into memory. You likely encountered this story in the sanitized pages of a children's anthology, perhaps attributed to the brothers Grimm, who dutifully collected the dark oral traditions of their time. Even in its comparatively softened form, The Girl Without Hands remains shockingly brutal, a narrative that stands apart from the typical tales of enchanted castles and charming princes. Imagine the chilling progression. You are introduced to a poor miller, desperate and destitute. One day, a mysterious old man appears, promising him immense wealth if he will only deliver to him that which stands behind his miller's daughter. Driven by greed and a chilling lack of paternal affection, the miller agrees, believing the old man refers to an apple tree. But you know, with a cold dread, that this figure is the devil himself, and his target is the miller's innocent, devout daughter. When the devil returns to claim his prize, he finds the girl pure of heart, having diligently washed herself, making it impossible for him to touch her. Enraged, the devil demands the miller prevent her from washing. The miller, blinded by his demonic pact, builds a fire for her to stand over, so she cannot cleanse herself. But still, her tears, symbols of her grief and purity, wash her hands clean. The devil, thwarted by her unwavering innocence, demands a more extreme measure. He orders the miller to cut off her hands. You recoil from the image, but the deed is done. The miller, driven by fear and avarice, commits the unspeakable act. The girl, now grievously mutilated, her raw stumps bandaged, is expelled from her home, exiled into a world she can no longer grasp. She wanders, weeping and starving, until she reaches a king's garden. A guardian angel or a compassionate king discovers her. He takes pity on her, and she demonstrates her resilience, eating fruit from a tree, receiving help from the natural world. Eventually, she marries the king, and by divine intervention, her hands are miraculously restored, growing back as if they were never severed. She bears a child, a son, symbolizing her renewed fertility and blessed life. But her trials are not over. The devil, or a jealous stepmother, intervenes again, intercepting messages between the king and queen, making the king believe his wife has given birth to a monster. She is once more exiled, cast out into the wilderness with her infant son. She endures more hardship, eventually finding refuge in a charcoal burner's hut. Miracles continue. Divine grace sustains her, and after many years the king, grief-stricken and searching for his lost queen, finds her. They are reunited, her innocence proven, and they live in happiness, her suffering finally redeemed. You cannot help but feel the brutal, almost surgical precision of this tale's cruelty. Why the hands? Why such an extreme act of mutilation? What purpose does such relentless suffering serve in a simple story? This is not mere narrative embellishment. It's a symbolic language. The narrative's harshness, even by fairy tale standards, hints at a deeper, more primal meaning, one that speaks of ancient pacts, ultimate sacrifice, and the profound, often violent, path to spiritual transcendence. To truly understand the visceral power and hidden meaning of the girl without hands, you must journey far beyond the Grimm brothers, reaching back into the mist-shrouded dawn of recorded history, into the fertile crescents of ancient Mesopotamia, the sun-baked sands of Egypt, and the mystical city-states of Sumer. Here, embedded within the oldest oral traditions and fragmented cuneiform tablets, you find the archetypal ancestors of this brutal tale, echoes of dismembered goddesses, primal vows of purity, and the chilling spectre of female sacrifice. This story, you realize, is not just centuries old, it is millennia old, predating the very religions that would later attempt to interpret its harsh truths. Consider the ancient Mesopotamian myths, where deities like Inanna, or Ishtar, undergo symbolic dismemberment during their descent into the underworld. In some narratives, she is stripped naked, her divine regalia removed, and eventually hung on a hook, appearing lifeless. While not a literal loss of hands, this motif of a powerful female figure being ritually stripped, rendered helpless, and undergoing a transformative death or dismemberment is strikingly similar. Her return from the underworld is a rebirth, a reclaiming of power that resonates with the girl's eventual restoration. These stories speak to the cyclical nature of divine feminine power, its temporary eclipse, and its eventual resurgence, often through suffering. In ancient Egyptian mythology, while direct parallels to a girl without hands are scarce, the concept of vows of purity and the symbolic cleansing of the body were paramount, particularly in religious contexts. Purity was not merely moral, it was ritualistic, tied to one's ability to interact with the divine. The girl's initial act of washing her hands, making her untouchable by the devil, mirrors ancient Egyptian purification rites performed before entering sacred spaces or engaging with deities. The emphasis on hands, as instruments of ritual action and purity, connects to this deep cultural understanding. To lose them, then, would be a profound symbolic defilement, a forfeiture of one's ability to perform sacred acts, or indeed, any act of consequence. More broadly, the motif of dismemberment or hand loss functioned symbolically in ancient cultures as a potent form of control, punishment, or even a pathway to altered states. In many tribal and early societal structures, the hands were synonymous with one's ability to work, to create, to defend, to feed oneself. To lose them was to be rendered utterly dependent, a fate worse than death for a self-sufficient individual. It symbolized a complete loss of agency or autonomy, a brutal erasure of one's identity as a functioning member of society. As punishment, it was a public shaming, a permanent mark of disgrace, a physical testament to a transgression against societal or divine law. Yet, paradoxically, in some shamanic traditions, symbolic dismemberment could be a prelude to spiritual power, a stripping away of the mundane self to allow for a profound mystical transformation. These ancient parallels reveal how the girl without hands is not an arbitrary invention, but an evolution of far older, deeper goddess archetypes and early patriarchal myths. Many goddess myths explore themes of sacred feminine suffering, often at the hands of malevolent forces or through a ritualistic passage that strips them of their power before it is eventually reclaimed. Simultaneously, the tale resonates with the rising patriarchal order, where the control and subjugation of female power, represented by her hands, her agency became a dominant social theme. The story thus functions as a chilling allegory for the historical processes by which ancient feminine deities were dismembered, their power fragmented and absorbed, their narratives reshaped to fit emerging societal norms, leaving behind only the haunting echoes of their suffering and eventual, arduous re-empowerment. The narrative, you realize, is an ancient lament, a coded memory of cosmic violence and profound endurance. To comprehend the profound, visceral horror of the girl's mutilation, you must move beyond the literal act and grasp what her hands truly represent in the ancient symbolic language encoded within this myth. the loss of her hands is not merely a physical injury. It is a meticulously chosen metaphorical sacrifice, rich with layers of psychological and societal meaning. Firstly, her hands are the very embodiment of her agency and autonomy. They are her connection to the physical world, the tools by which she interacts, creates, and sustains herself. To lose them is to be rendered utterly powerless, incapable of self-defense, self-sufficiency, or even basic self-care. Imagine the profound terror, the suffocating helplessness, as she is cast out, unable to perform the simplest tasks to feed herself, to draw water, to mend her clothes, to defend against the elements. This deliberate dismemberment symbolizes the systematic stripping away of female power and independence in increasingly patriarchal societies, reducing women to a state of profound vulnerability and reliance on external forces. It's a chilling portrayal of disenfranchisement, where one's very means of engagement with the world are severed. Secondly, the removal of her hands can be interpreted as a brutal, social, or religious punishment, albeit one for a crime she did not commit. In many ancient cultures, dismemberment, particularly of hands, was a common punishment for theft or perceived moral transgressions, designed to mark the offender and prevent future acts. Here, her hands are severed not for her own sin, but as a direct consequence of her father's pact with the devil, a transference of guilt and a grotesque form of proxy punishment. This resonates with the ancient concept of collective sin or inherited curses, where the innocent suffer for the transgressions of others. Her purity, instead of protecting her, paradoxically becomes the catalyst for her mutilation, transforming her into a martyr whose suffering cleanses the sin of another. Yet, from this profound loss, a startling paradox emerges. Her mutilation becomes a pathway to transformation into sacred femininity or martyrdom. Stripped of her worldly capabilities, she is forced to rely entirely on divine grace. Her helplessness elevates her to a state of pure, unwavering faith. The very act of living without hands forces her into a different mode of being, one of profound inner strength, spiritual resilience, and transcendent virtue. Her suffering purifies her, making her a vessel for the miraculous, as seen when her hands are later restored by divine intervention. She becomes an archetype of the long-suffering, yet ultimately victorious, feminine spirit, a figure of profound grace born from unimaginable pain. This tale, you realize, resonates deeply with Jungian archetypes. She embodies the wounded feminine, a primordial archetype representing the pain, sacrifice, and resilience of women throughout history, who have endured trauma, disempowerment, or societal subjugation. Her exile transforms her into the exiled healer, one who finds profound inner wisdom and eventually brings healing not through conventional means, but through grace and endurance. She is also the sacred maiden, whose purity is tested and ultimately sanctified through ordeal, often serving as a conduit for divine blessings. From a historical context, this myth perfectly encapsulates what it meant for women to lose power, silence, or control in patriarchal societies. In many ancient and medieval cultures, women's lives were defined by their hands. Their ability to spin, weave, cook, care for children, or perform agricultural labor. To sever these hands was to render a woman economically and socially inert, dependent, and utterly vulnerable. The story, therefore, becomes a harrowing allegory for the historical disenfranchisement of women, their forced silence in public discourse, and the brutal means by which their autonomy was often stripped away. Yet, it also offers a glimmer of hope, a mythic reassurance that even in the face of such profound loss, the inner spirit can endure, transform, and ultimately reclaim its sacred power. You are confronted with the chilling reality that the mythical mutilation mirrors a very real historical suppression. The deeper you delve into the ancient layers of the girl without hands, the more you confront its raw, unsettling origins, particularly in the darker versions where malevolent entities, devils, demons, and other primal forces play a central, terrifying role. This isn't just a metaphor for human evil, it's a direct encounter with ancient spiritual beliefs, a chilling echo of the pacts and trials that defined humanity's struggle against unseen powers. In many variants, the miller's agreement is explicitly a pact with the devil, a literal bargain for his soul or prosperity in exchange for his daughter's life force, or, more concretely, her hands. This concept of a devilish contract, where an individual sells their humanity for worldly gain, is a recurring motif in folklore and theology, particularly prominent in early Christian demonology. You witness the insidious nature of such pacts. They never truly deliver prosperity without demanding an exorbitant, grotesque price, often targeting the innocent. The devil's insistence on the girl's dismemberment is not arbitrary. It is a ritualistic act designed to claim her, to mar her purity, to sever her from the divine protection her pure heart affords. He cannot simply take her soul, he must corrupt her physical form, making her unclean, and thus vulnerable to his influence. Her subsequent trials by exile, particularly her wandering through the desolate wilderness or deep, dark forests, are not mere narrative devices. This forest exile functions as a symbolic death, a descent into the underworld or a liminal space where the boundaries between life and death, civilization and wilderness, dissolve. Stripped of her hands and cast out, she is symbolically dead to the world she once knew. This mirrors ancient purification rituals that often involve temporary exile or ritualistic suffering, where an individual was separated from their community, endured hardship, and then, if they survived, returned, transformed, and purified. The harshness of the wilderness becomes a crucible, forging her resilience, stripping away all but her purest essence. Her miraculous sustenance and survival in the wild, often attributed to the intervention of an angel or divine grace, symbolizes a new kind of spiritual connection. Her extreme vulnerability opens her to a higher power that protects and nourishes her when all earthly means are gone. This is where the narrative intertwines with early Christian demonology and broader ancient beliefs about spiritual warfare. Demons, like the devil in the story, were not just figures of evil. They were seen as active agents of temptation and tests of faith. The girl's ordeal becomes a profound test of her purity and devotion. Her refusal to succumb to despair, her unwavering faith despite unimaginable torment, thwarts the devil's ultimate goal of corrupting her soul. Furthermore, the act of mutilation and exile echoes ancient purification rituals involving sacrifice. In some primitive cultures, self-mutilation or the sacrifice of body parts was a way to appease deities, to atone for sins, or to initiate a new spiritual phase. While the girl's hands are taken from her by coercion, her endurance transforms the forced sacrifice into an act of profound spiritual purification. The story taps into primal fears of bodily violation and spiritual contamination, while simultaneously offering the hope of redemption and transcendent rebirth through suffering. Her eventual return, with hands miraculously restored, is the ultimate rebirth of validation of her purity, and a triumph over the dark forces that sought to claim her. You perceive the echoes of countless ancient rites of passage, now condensed into this single, haunting narrative, a testament to humanity's age-old struggle against inner and outer darkness. You have journeyed deep into the heart of a tale that is far more than a children's story, a narrative that has persisted across 300 years, transforming from fragmented ancient myths into the haunting fairy tale of the girl without hands. What emerges from this descent into its origins is not just a tale of suffering, but a profound testament to the enduring human spirit and the sacred, often brutal, path to transformation. The girl, stripped of her hands, her agency, her very means of interacting with the world, ultimately becomes not merely a victim, but a powerful vessel of transformation. Her mutilation, initially a brutal act of control and punishment, becomes the crucible through which her inner strength, her unwavering purity, and her spiritual resilience are forged. She is a symbol of survival in the face of unimaginable adversity, a beacon of sacred power derived from profound vulnerability. Her story reminds you that true strength often emerges not from what one possesses, but from what one endures and overcomes, finding solace and sustenance in realms beyond the physical. Why has this narrative endured? Why does it continue to haunt and compel across more than 4 millennia? Because it speaks to the universal human experience of profound loss, of being rendered helpless, of facing external forces that seek to disempower and define you. It speaks to the necessary suffering that often precedes genuine growth, the symbolic death that must occur before true rebirth. It is a story that transcends specific cultures and religions because it taps into primal fears of bodily violation, the loss of autonomy, and the terrifying vulnerability of existence. Yet, it simultaneously offers profound hope, the miraculous restoration of what was lost, the triumph of innocence, and the enduring power of faith and purity. This tale, you realize, is not just entertainment. It is a spiritual archetype, a sacred map encoding humanity's ancient wisdom about enduring trials, maintaining inner integrity, and emerging from the depths of despair transformed and strengthened. It reminds you that even when the world attempts to strip you of your means, your identity, your very hands, the power to create, to connect, and to thrive ultimately resides within. It compels you to look at your own struggles, your own perceived limitations, and ask, have you truly lost your hands, or are you merely in a period of necessary transformation, awaiting your own miraculous restoration? The girl without hands is not just a character from a book. She is a timeless myth, a living symbol of feminine suffering, resilience, and sacred power. Her silence, her tears, her miraculous endurance, they echo across the ages, a haunting reminder that the most profound stories are often those etched not in ink, but in the agony and triumph of the human soul. And as you close the book on this tale, you might find yourself glancing down at your own hands, perhaps with a newfound reverence for the power they embody, and the unseen forces that have always sought to claim, or perhaps to elevate them. The ancient secrets you now know are never truly buried. They are simply waiting for you to find them, to feel their deep, unsettling truth resonating within your own spirit.